Have you ever noticed something strange about Christianity? Millions of Christians all read the same Bible, pray to the same God, follow the same Jesus. And yet they disagree about so many things: baptism, salvation, heaven and hell, end times, worship styles, free will, predestination, women in ministry, spiritual gifts, communion, even what it truly means to follow Christ. So here's the uncomfortable question. If Christianity is true, why do Christians disagree so much? And if believers can't agree with each other, how is anyone supposed to know what's actually true? That question has challenged believers, skeptics, pastors, and theologians for centuries. And tonight, we're going to explore it honestly, not to attack Christianity, not to mock faith, but to ask a deeply human question. Why do Christians disagree? Welcome back to Sacred Questions, the channel where we explore difficult questions about God, faith, doubt, and Christianity with honesty, humility, and curiosity. And this topic matters more than most people realize, because for some people, Christian disagreement is merely confusing. But for others, it becomes a reason to walk away from faith entirely. After all, if Christians claim the Bible contains truth from God, shouldn't believers arrive at the same conclusions? At first glance, disagreement can feel like evidence that something is broken. But is that necessarily true? Let's explore it. First, we should admit something openly. Christians really do disagree. And sometimes the disagreements are intense. History is filled with debates, church splits, councils, denominations, and theological conflicts. Today there are Catholics, Orthodox Christians, Baptists, Pentecostals, Lutherans, Anglicans, Reformed Christians, non-denominational churches, and many more. To outsiders, this can look chaotic, but not all disagreements are equal. That's important. Most Christians throughout history actually agree on the core foundations of the faith: that God exists, that Jesus lived, died, and rose again, that humans are sinful, that grace matters, that love is central, that Christ is Lord. These beliefs unite billions of Christians across cultures and centuries. The disagreements usually happen around interpretation, emphasis, tradition, or secondary doctrines. But that still raises another difficult question. Why would interpretation even be necessary? Why wouldn't God make everything perfectly clear? One reason Christians disagree is because the Bible is not a simple modern instruction manual. It's a collection of books written across centuries, in different languages, by different authors, inside different cultures and historical moments. The Bible contains poetry, history, prophecy, parables, letters, symbolism, wisdom literature, and apocalyptic imagery, and interpretation is unavoidable. For example, when Jesus says, "This is my body" during communion, is he speaking literally or symbolically? When Genesis describes creation in 6 days, should that be read scientifically, poetically, or theologically? When Revelation describes beasts and dragons and cosmic battles, are those literal future events or symbolic imagery? Different Christians answer differently because they approach Scripture differently. Some prioritize literal interpretation, others focus on historical context. Some emphasize church tradition, others emphasize personal reading and conscience. And honestly, human beings interpret everything through their experiences, assumptions, culture, and worldview. Even outside religion, people read the same constitution, the same scientific data, or the same historical event, and still disagree. So disagreement itself may not automatically prove Christianity false. It may reveal something about human limitations. And that brings us to another uncomfortable truth. Christians are human, which means Christians are capable of pride, bias, fear, tribalism, and ego, just like everyone else. Sometimes disagreements are sincere attempts to pursue truth, but sometimes they're driven by power, or politics, or tradition, or identity. History shows this clearly. Certain Christians defended slavery, while others fought against it using the very same Bible. Some churches resisted science, others embraced it. Some used faith to justify violence, others used faith to protect the vulnerable. This tension has always existed. And the Bible itself actually warns about this. The New Testament repeatedly cautions believers about false teachers, divisions, arrogance, and spiritual blindness. In other words, Christian disagreement is not surprising to the Bible. The Bible expects flawed humans to wrestle with truth imperfectly. That doesn't eliminate the problem, but it changes the way we look at it. Now here's where the conversation becomes philosophical. Many people assume if Christians disagree, Christianity must be false. But does that logic really hold? Doctors disagree about treatments. Scientists disagree about theories. Philosophers disagree about ethics. Economists disagree about solutions. Even atheists disagree about morality, meaning, consciousness, and truth. Disagreement exists in nearly every field involving complex questions. So the existence of disagreement does not necessarily destroy the possibility of truth. Instead, it may reveal that humans struggle to fully grasp truth. And Christianity itself actually makes that claim. The Apostle Paul wrote, "For now we see through a glass darkly." In other words, human understanding is partial, limited, incomplete. Some Christians argue that faith was never meant to eliminate all mystery. It was meant to create a relationship with God while humans continue wrestling with understanding. But critics push back here. If salvation is so important, shouldn't the message be clearer? That's a fair question. And Christians answer it differently. Some believe the core message is clear: love God, love others, trust Christ, while secondary issues remain open to interpretation. Others believe God allows ambiguity because genuine faith requires freedom rather than forced certainty, and others admit they simply don't know why God permits so much confusion. That honesty matters. Now, this might sound surprising, but some Christians believe disagreement can actually deepen faith. Why? Because disagreement forces people to think, to study, to question assumptions, to wrestle honestly with difficult ideas. Without disagreement, faith can become shallow tradition, but wrestling can produce maturity. Some of the greatest Christian thinkers in history, from Augustine of Hippo to C.S. Lewis, developed their ideas through debate, questions, and intellectual struggle. Even the disciples of Jesus misunderstood him constantly. They argued with each other, they doubted, they questioned. And yet Christianity teaches that God still worked through imperfect people. Maybe that's part of the point. But perhaps the deepest question isn't, why do Christians disagree? Maybe the deeper question is, what should Christians do because they disagree? Should disagreement produce hatred, division, mockery, condemnation, or humility, patience, curiosity, compassion? Ironically, Jesus did not say the world would recognize his followers by perfect agreement. He said they would be recognized by love. That doesn't mean truth doesn't matter. But it may mean the spirit in which truth is pursued matters too. And maybe that's where many Christians, and many skeptics, still struggle. At the end of the day, Christian disagreement remains one of the most challenging aspects of the faith. For some people, it creates doubt. For others, it creates humility. And for others still, it becomes an invitation to search deeper rather than walk away. But perhaps the existence of disagreement does not prove that nobody is seeking truth. Maybe it reveals how difficult truth really is for human beings to fully understand. And maybe the real test of faith is not whether people disagree, but how they treat each other when they do. So now I want to ask you, why do you think Christians disagree? Does disagreement weaken faith, or can it strengthen it? Let's talk about it respectfully in the comments. And if you enjoy exploring difficult questions about God, Christianity, doubt, and truth, subscribe to Sacred Questions and join us for the next conversation. Because some questions are too important to ignore, and some truths are only discovered by those willing to wrestle with them.